Fundamentally, it's that the structures that are breaking down are creating space for a splendid diversity of new things that we cannot imagine. And some of those things may be non-human things. Actually, many of them will. Now, a big part of climate change that's hard to wrap our heads around is loss of biodiversity. Estimates range from between 15% and 40% of all species going extinct because of human-caused climate change. We have no idea what that actually means. What does it mean for 15% of species? Well, first of all, we don't know how many there are. Estimates range from 10 million species to 100 million species because it's really damn hard to go out into the field and measure them. We don't even know how many species are in my gut right now, how many different kinds of bacteria, because it's really hard to measure. And because they're evolving and the species are changing. Bacteria can change species in hours to days. Just like new strains of flu come about every year, new species. And so to try to project and imagine what the future life on Earth is going to be like with this loss of biodiversity is completely impossible. But worse than that, it's not even a good idea to try knowing. Thinking we should know is a bad idea. Thinking that we should know what the biodiversity of the Earth will be like is a bad idea. The reason it's a bad idea is because it forces us to limit ourselves to what we can imagine now, which is guaranteed to be less than what will come. So it's a bad idea to pigeonhole ourselves before we've even started in trying to imagine the future. And this is one of the things about trying to manage the change of human-caused planetary shift. So not just global warming, but all of the other ways that we're changing the planet, is that we are being told things as if they're true, like the United Nations projections of human population. They have this chart. Right now, the population is 7.4 billion. The chart shows a graph that goes up that stabilizes at 2050. Bullshit. We don't know what the population is going to be in 2050. But that graph makes it look like it's real and already known. So we do this where we take our current knowledge, we project it forward in time, and we blind ourselves to imagining possible futures. But we also have been taught that we're supposed to know. So we try to imagine the future because we've been told that knowing the future is what we're supposed to do. But in a time like this, not knowing the future is what we're supposed to do. Everyone who has money to invest in solutions is going to give it to the people who have a track record of doing things that are viable and proven and all these other things that seem like good ideas. But really all they're doing is investing in a paradigm of knowledge that is ill-suited to these times. They would be much better to invest their money in the human emotional capacity to deal with uncertainty. I had this debate with someone on Facebook a couple weeks ago. They posted a provocative question. If you could advise an impact investor who had $50 million, what would you tell them to invest in to make an impact in the future? And I said, I would tell them to invest in emotion regulation in the development of children so that children could manage uncertainty and change. And this person responded flippantly and said, you mean like Head Start? And I said, yes, exactly like Head Start, because they've actually done the economic impact analysis. And for every dollar we spend on Head Start, we save $3 as a society. It's a guaranteed win. So of course they should invest in Head Start. But why did this person think they needed to ridicule that answer? Why do they think that investing in the emotional capacities of children to be creative and to be in relationships was not worth investing in? Because they didn't see it as a solution. Because you don't know what those children will do. That's the whole point, is we're not preparing these children to do something. We're preparing these children to be in an environment where they won't know what to do. So they need to be able to regulate their emotions because they need to deal with anxiety and uncertainty. So this inversion of knowledge, this taking the assumption of knowledge and then turning it inside out, is how we get to the place that we need to be. we say we know that the future cannot be what we've been told it's going to be. So how do we prepare for the future not being that? Where we don't try to put something else in its place. See, we have to withhold that. So the default response that someone will have when you say your solution's not going to work is they say, if you're so smart, then what is the solution? Well, what if instead of a solution, it's how do we ask better questions instead of having better answers?
In your view, what are the right questions we should be asking ourselves right now?
First and foremost is the question, what does it mean to be human? We need to ask ourselves deeply and with humility to understand what makes us different from other animals and what makes us the same, and what human nature really is. If we understand that human beings are not rational, greedy, selfish maximizers of things for me, which is what mainstream economics tells us, and instead that we are social and moral animals who absolutely depend on others for our well-being, these kinds of shifts in what it means to be human. That's an inquiry we need to actively grapple with. Also, we need to quote my friend Rachel Bagby, we need to go from wow to how now shall I live, which is both wow, how beautiful and amazing this thing I learned about the world is, to how do I use it and live with it and celebrate its beauty, to wow, that's fucked up and it's going to really cause problems, and how do I live? And so this tension between awe and fear and right living, which gets back to the practice of virtue ethics. What does it mean to be a good person? What is right relationship? So we can ask questions about right relationship. A third kind of question I think is really important to ask is, how did things come to be this way? History and the process through which things came to be this way matters a great deal. We cannot make sense of the present moment without knowing how it came to be this way. History matters. And not just history as in, what happened with our governments and our wars and the political leaders of the last 100 years, but developmentally, how did life come to be, and what is life, and how has it changed the planet across billions of years? How did humans arise, and what makes us different or similar to the other things that we come from as part of being in a living universe? How did civilizations come into being and create structural inequality and the kinds of things that we see in the world today? How did the economic systems that we have today come into being? Because asking the question of how did things come to be lets us do two things. It lets us recognize that things that seem so powerful and prevalent in the world are not permanent. They haven't always existed. Like, you think capitalism is this big, powerful thing. Capitalism is less than 500 years old. 500 years ago, there was no such thing as capitalism. It didn't exist. So if we understand how things came to be, we see the way that things didn't always exist, so it opens us up to other possibilities. Also, if we ask the question, how did things come to be, we see the structural root causes of things that are problems. And that gives us the ability to create systemic interventions that change how the systems work to enable us to solve them. So how did things come to be is a fundamental question for these times. And so I think if we ask, what does it mean to be human? Going from wow to how now shall I live? And how did things come to be? These will all open us up to the kind of preparedness for the unknown that we're entering into.